Bring it faster. Dale Cruz grabbed Nora Vega's ponytail and yanked her head backward. Coffee splashed down her apron, burning through the fabric. The table erupted in laughter. Smile when you serve, sweetheart. Makes it worth the tip. His fingers twisted tighter. She couldn't breathe. 28 years old, former combat medic, raising her dead sister's 7-year-old daughter alone. And these men were destroying her, while an entire diner watched and said nothing. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then from the corner booth, a low growl rolled across the floor like thunder finding its target. A Navy SEAL in digital camouflage tightened his leash and said one word: easy. The thugs had just made the worst mistake of their lives. Subscribe now and follow this story to the very end. Drop your city in the comments below. We want to see how far this story travels. Trust us, you don't want to miss what happens next. Nora Vega woke at 4:30 in the morning, the same way she'd woken every morning for the past 14 months. With a dead woman's name caught between her teeth and a 7-year-old girl curled against her ribs. Sophie was sleeping. That small body pressed tight, fingers gripping Nora's shirt the way she'd gripped it every night since they buried her mother. The nightmares had slowed, but never stopped. Sophie would whimper, kick, go rigid, and then Nora's hand would find her back, press flat, and hold until the breathing steadied. "It's okay, baby. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." She said it every night. Some nights she believed it. Most nights she just needed Sophie to believe it. The alarm didn't go off because Nora never said it. Her body didn't need permission to wake up. It ran on the schedule it had learned in Afghanistan. 4 hours of broken sleep, then move. Always move. Stillness was where the memories lived. She slid out of bed without waking Sophie, pulled on her work clothes in the dark, and stood over the girl for a moment longer than she should have. Sophie's face in sleep looked exactly like Lisa's face. Same cheekbones, same curve of the mouth, same dark curls falling across the pillow like a promise someone forgot to keep. Lisa, her sister, 14 months dead, fentanyl overdose in a bathroom while her 7-year-old daughter sat in the next room watching cartoons and waiting for lunch that never came. Nora locked the apartment door behind her and walked to work. The diner opened at 6. Gloria Mendez was already behind the grill, same as every morning for the last 22 years. 63 years old, arms like a woman half her age, eyes that caught everything and forgave almost nothing. "You look like death, mija." "Good morning to you too, Gloria. I'm serious. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? When's the last time you minded your own business?" "Never, and I'm not starting today." Gloria set a plate of eggs on the counter. "Eat. You're no good to Sophie if you collapse." Nora took the plate because arguing with Gloria was like arguing with gravity. She ate standing up, the way she'd eaten in the field. Fast, functional, tasting nothing. "Sophie talking yet?" Gloria asked, quieter now. "She talks to me." "I mean to other people. Kids at school. Her teacher." "She'll talk when she's ready." "It's been 14 months. "I know how long it's been." Gloria held up both hands. "I'm just saying, that little girl watched her mama die, Nora. She needs more than you can give her alone." "She's getting everything I have." "That's what scares me." The morning shift came and went. Regulars filtered in. Tom Bennett, 74, retired plumber. Eggs over easy. Same booth every day since his wife passed. Maria Gonzalez, night nurse. Too tired to talk, but always left a $1 tip she couldn't afford. Old Pete, who nursed one coffee for 3 hours and told stories about Ridgewood before the drugs came and hollowed everything out. "Used to be families on every block," Pete said to no one in particular. "Little League on Saturdays, church suppers." Now half the houses are empty, and the other half are scared. Scared of what? Tom asked, though he knew. Scared of the same thing everybody's scared of. The people running this town, who aren't the people we elected. Nobody said the name. Nobody needed to. In Ridgewood, Colorado, one name owned the silence, and the silence owned everything else. Dale Cruz. Nora refilled Pete's coffee and said nothing. She'd learned to say nothing about Dale, the way she'd learned to say nothing about the bodies in Afghanistan. Not because the words didn't exist, but because saying them out loud made them real. And real was something she couldn't afford. Not with Sophie depending on her. Not with the custody arrangement still fragile. Not with everything balanced on the edge of a life she'd built from the wreckage of her sister's death. But she knew. She knew Dale Cruz ran the fentanyl pipeline that threaded through Ridgewood like poison through a vein. She knew his auto part shop on Route 9 was a front. She knew the diner, this diner, where she poured coffee and carried plates and smiled at people who would never know what it cost her to smile. Sat on a lease controlled by Dale's property company. She knew because Lisa had told her. 3 weeks before she died, Lisa had called at 2 a.m, voice shaking, words tumbling. "I've been doing his books, Nora. I know where the money goes. I know who he pays. I know everything." And then, quieter, "I'm going to tell someone." Nora had said, "Be careful." 3 weeks later, Lisa was dead. The official report said accidental overdose. The batch that killed Lisa also killed 5 other people in 3 counties that same week. Contaminated supply. Nobody investigated where the supply came from. Nobody asked why a woman who had been clean for 6 months suddenly shot up with the most lethal batch to hit Colorado in a decade. Nobody asked because the people who should have been asking were the same people Dale Cruz had already silenced. The evening shift started at 4. Nora traded her morning exhaustion for her evening mask. The smile, the efficiency, the practiced warmth that made customers tip better and ask fewer questions. She was good at masks. Afghanistan had taught her that. You could be falling apart behind the face. As long as the face held steady, the mission continued. Sophie was at Mrs. Patterson's house 3 blocks away. Safe. Fed. Not talking, but safe. That was enough. It had to be enough. At 7:15, the door opened, and Nora felt the temperature change before she saw who walked in. Dale Cruz entered first, mid-30s, dirty blonde hair, work jacket. The kind of man who looked ordinary until you noticed the way people moved out of his path without being asked. He had a smile that never reached his eyes, and a handshake that always held too long. Behind him came Wade Purcell, phone already in his hand, camera ready. Wade documented everything. It was his currency. He filmed people at their worst and used the footage as leverage, as entertainment, as proof that he could destroy someone's life with the push of a button. Last came Mitch Grady, 22, the youngest. He laughed when the other 2 laughed and went quiet when they went quiet. A shadow that hadn't yet decided if it wanted to be its own person or someone else's tool. They took the center booth. Dale snapped his fingers without looking up. "Nora, service." She approached with her pad. "Good evening. What can I get you?" "What you can get me is faster than last time. 3 beers, 3 steaks, and don't make us wait. Kitchen's backed up tonight. Might be 20 minutes on the steaks." Did I ask for excuses? Dale looked at her for the first time. That look. The one that moved over her body like she was inventory. "I asked for steaks." 20 minutes, Dale." 10, and bring the beers now, cold ones, not that warm garbage you served last week. Nora wrote the order and walked to the bar. Her hand was steady. Her pulse was not. Gloria was watching through the kitchen window. "You okay?" "I'm fine." You're not fine. Your jaw's locked, and your hands are white. Gloria, I'm fine. She brought the beers, set them down without a word, turned to leave. Hey! Wade's voice. She stopped. Smile when you walk, sweetheart. Makes it worth the tip. Nora didn't smile. She kept walking. What, you deaf or just stupid? Dale called after her, loud enough for the room to hear. Tom Bennett looked up from his booth. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Maria at the counter set down her cup. Old Pete turned his head, slow, watching the way he watched everything in Ridgewood, with the careful attention of a man who had seen bad things get worse. Bring it faster! Dale said it like a command, like she was something he owned. Nora brought the steaks in 12 minutes. She set each plate carefully, precisely, the way she'd placed instruments on a surgical tray in the field. Everything where it belonged, nothing wasted, no movement extra. Dale cut into a steak, chewed, and looked at Wade. Medium rare. I said rare. You said medium rare, Dale. Are you telling me what I said? His voice dropped. The room heard it drop. I'm telling you what you ordered. Bring it back. Get it right. She reached for the plate. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Not testing, not asking. Squeezing. The grip of a man who believed contact was a language, and the only word he knew was control. And this time, he said, leaning close enough that she could smell the beer on his breath, bring it faster, or do I need to teach you how to move? Let go of my wrist. Or what? Something moved across the diner. Not a sound, a vibration. Low, deep, rolling across the floor like heat from a furnace. A growl that didn't announce itself so much as arrive, fully formed and absolutely certain. In the corner booth, a man sat alone. He hadn't touched his food. His posture was loose, controlled, the kind of relax that only came from years of training the body to be ready while looking like it wasn't. He wore military fatigues, NWU Type 3, digital camouflage in greens and browns, and his dark brown hair was cut close, clean, the hair of someone who still followed the discipline even after the orders had stopped. His name was Cole Archer, 30 years old, maybe SEAL. 5 weeks out of Afghanistan, driving cross-country to Montana to collect the ashes of his brother Ryan, also a SEAL, dead 3 weeks from a bullet he'd put through his own temple because the war followed him home, and nobody answered when he knocked. Cole had stopped in Ridgewood for coffee and a meal, and a few hours where the highway stopped screaming at him. He hadn't planned to stay. He hadn't planned anything since Kabul. At his feet, Ghost lay flat, an 85-pound German shepherd with brown tan and black coloring, amber eyes, and the particular stillness of an animal that had been bred, trained, and battle-tested to identify threats before they became casualties. Ghost had detected the IED that saved Cole's life 4 months ago, the same IED that killed 2 of his handlers. The dog had survived the blast, dragged himself to Cole through smoke and debris, and refused to leave his side since. Now Ghost's ears were forward, his body rigid, his eyes locked on Dale Cruz's hand, the hand gripping Nora's wrist, with the precision of a targeting system that had already calculated the distance, the angle, and the force required. The growl deepened. Cole tightened his grip on the leash. 1 fraction. Easy, he said under his breath. Stay. Ghost held, coiled, vibrating with controlled intent. Dale heard the growl. His grip on Nora's wrist loosened, not because he chose to let go, but because something ancient in his brain recognized the sound of a predator and overrode his ego for exactly 1 second. 1 second was enough. Nora's free hand came up, not fast, not dramatic, and rested on Dale's wrist as if to steady herself. Her fingers found the joint by feel. Pressure point. Precise. The kind of knowledge that didn't come from a diner, but from a combat medic who had spent 2 years in Afghanistan learning exactly where the human body was strongest and where it could be broken with almost nothing. She applied pressure. Minimal. Surgical. Dale's breath left him in a grunt he couldn't control. His fingers opened. He stumbled back against the booth, more shocked than hurt, knocking his beer sideways. Wade cursed and grabbed his phone. "Hey! What the?" Mitch jumped up, then sat back down when he had no idea what to do next. The German shepherd stood. Cole stood with him. The diner went silent, the absolute pressed flat silence of a room that had just realized the math had changed and nobody had finished counting. "Sit down," Cole said. Not loud, level, carrying the tone of a man who had given orders in places where disobedience meant body bags. "All of you." Dale's face was red, humiliation and rage fighting for control. "Who the hell are you?" "Sit down." "I asked you a question." Ghost took one step forward. No lunge, no bark. Just the promise of motion. Controlled, precise, inevitable. The dog's lips drew back just enough to show teeth that had been designed by 40,000 years of evolution to end arguments. Dale sat. Wade lowered his phone. Mitch hadn't moved since the first growl. "Ma'am," Cole said to Nora, his voice shifting. Softer now, respectful. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Are you sure?" "I've had worse." Something passed between them, a recognition that had nothing to do with faces and everything to do with posture. The way she stood, the way she breathed, the balanced weight, the steady hands, the eyes that scanned a room the way a medic scans a triage line. "You were military," Cole said. Not a question. "Combat medic, 2 tours." "Army?" 68th Whiskey. Cole nodded once, the nod of a man who understood exactly what that meant. The blood, the dust, the hands that kept working when the screaming stopped, because stopping meant someone died. Tom Bennett was on his feet. I saw everything. He grabbed her, unprovoked. "Sit down, old man," Wade snapped. "I will not sit down. I've been watching you 3 come in here and terrorize this woman for months, and I'm done watching." Maria set down her coffee. "I saw it too." Old Pete stood slowly, his knees cracking. "So did I." The silence broke, not into chaos, but into something more dangerous for Dale Cruz. Into witnesses. Into voices that had been quiet for too long, finding the frequency of defiance. Dale's eyes swept the room, calculating. He'd owned this silence for 3 years. He'd built his empire on it, the understanding that nobody in Ridgewood would speak, because everybody in Ridgewood had something to lose. But the math had changed. A dog and a soldier and a waitress who wouldn't kneel had rewritten the equation, and Dale could feel the numbers shifting under his feet. "Wade," Dale said quietly. "Phone away." Wade hesitated. "Now." Wade pocketed the phone. Dale stood slowly, adjusting his jacket, rebuilding the composure that Nora's wrist lock and Ghost's growl had stripped away. He looked at Cole, at the fatigues, at the dog, at the leash, held with the casual certainty of a man who could release it at any moment and choose not to. "You're making a mistake," Dale said. "I don't think I am. You don't know this town. You don't know how things work here. I know how things work everywhere. Men like you only work in rooms where nobody pushes back." Cole paused. Someone just pushed back. Dale turned to leave. Wade and Mitch followed. At the door, Dale stopped and looked directly at Nora. Not at Cole, not at Ghost. At Nora. "I know about Sophie," he said. Quiet, precise. A scalpel, not a hammer. I know about Lisa, and I know you saw something you shouldn't have. The diner heard it. Every person in the room heard it. Nora's face didn't change, but her hands, the hands that had held soldiers together in the dust, that had pressed against her sister's chest in a bathroom, trying to restart a heart that the poison had already stopped. Her hands trembled. Just once. Then they were still again. Dale walked out. The door swung shut. The engine of his truck turned over, and he was gone. Gloria came out of the kitchen. She looked at Nora. She looked at Cole. She looked at Ghost, who was still standing, still locked, still waiting for the threat to return. "Someone call the sheriff," Gloria said. "Sheriff won't help," Tom said. "Sheriff's been Dale's man for 5 years." "Then someone call the state police." "Gloria," Nora's voice stopped everything. "Not tonight. Not yet." "Mija, I said not yet." The diner emptied slowly. Tom squeezed Nora's shoulder on the way out. Maria left a 20 under her coffee cup. 3 times her usual tip. The only language she had for what she'd witnessed. Old Pete stopped at the door and turned back. "My wife died in this town," he said. "She loved this town. And those men are killing it the same way they killed your sister. Slow. Quiet. While the rest of us pretend we don't see." Then he was gone. Nora started cleaning tables. Not because they needed cleaning, because her hands needed work. Movement. Purpose. The thing that kept the tremor from becoming a collapse. Cole was still in the corner booth. Ghost had finally lowered himself back to the floor, but his ears stayed forward, tracking Nora's movements with the patient vigilance of an animal that had decided she was inside the perimeter. "You should go," Nora said, without looking at him. "Whatever you stopped here for, coffee, food, a break from the road, you got it. Thank you for what you did. But you should go." "He threatened you." "He's been threatening me for a year." He mentioned a name. Sophie. Nora stopped wiping the table. Her back was to Cole. She didn't turn around. "Sophie is my niece. She's 7. She doesn't speak to anyone except me. And she's the only reason I haven't burned this town to the ground." "And Lisa?" The rag stopped moving. "Lisa was my sister. She died 14 months ago. Fentanyl overdose." Nora's voice was flat, controlled. The voice of a woman who had told this story to herself so many times, it had worn smooth like a river stone. "At least, that's what the report says. But that's not what you believe." Nora turned around. She looked at Cole. Really looked at him for the first time. Not at the fatigues of the dog or the hands that held the leash. At his eyes. The eyes of a man who had seen things that couldn't be unseen, and was still trying to figure out what to do with all of it. "My sister was clean for 6 months, Nora said. "She was going to meetings. She had a sponsor. She was getting Sophie back on track. And she was keeping books for Dale Cruz because she needed the money, and he needed someone who wouldn't ask questions. But she asked questions. She didn't have to ask. She saw the numbers. She knew where the money came from, and where it went, and who it paid. 3 weeks before she died, she called me and said she was going to talk. She said she had proof. And 3 weeks later? 3 weeks later, she was dead. The batch that killed her killed 5 other people. Contaminated fentanyl. Nobody investigated the source. Nobody asked why a woman who'd been clean for 6 months suddenly used the most lethal product to hit Colorado in a year. Nora's eyes held. Nobody asked, because the man who controls the supply also controls the silence. Cole was quiet for a long moment. Ghost shifted, pressing closer to Nora's leg. Not because Cole told him to, but because the dog had identified distress the way he identified explosives. Automatically. Absolutely. What did he mean when he said you saw something you shouldn't have? Cole asked. Nora looked at the door Dale had walked through, then at Gloria, who was standing in the kitchen doorway with both hands on the frame and tears she wouldn't let fall. My sister left something behind, Nora said. Something Dale's been looking for since the day she died. What is it? Proof. Everything Lisa saw. The accounts, the routes, the names, the payments. She put it on a drive, and she hid it where Dale would never think to look. Nora paused. She hid it in Sophie's teddy bear. Cole looked at Ghost. The dog looked back at him, and in that exchange, silent, ancient, the wordless communication between a handler and his partner, Cole made the decision that would change everything. I was supposed to be in Montana, he said, picking up my brother's ashes. He was a SEAL too. He killed himself 3 weeks ago because he came home from war, and nobody was there. I'm sorry. Ryan spent his whole life being brave for other people, and when he needed someone to be brave for him, the room was empty. Cole's hand rested on Ghost's head. I can't fix that. I can't bring him back. But I can make sure the next room I walk into isn't empty when someone needs help. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when he put his hands on you and threatened a 7-year-old girl. You don't know what Dale Cruz is capable of. I know exactly what men like him are capable of. Cole stood. Ghost rose with him. I also know what a Navy SEAL, a combat medic, and an 85-pound German Shepherd are capable of. And I promise you, it's more. Nora stared at him. This stranger in camouflage fatigues, with a dead brother's ashes waiting in Montana, and a dog who had survived an explosion that killed 2 men, and a calm in his voice that sounded like the eye of a hurricane. Steady, not because the storm wasn't coming, but because he'd already decided to walk into it. One condition, she said. Name it. If it goes bad, really bad, you take Sophie. You and Ghost. You take her, and you don't look back. Nora, promise me. She's all that's left of Lisa. She's all that's left of anything. Cole held her gaze. He thought about Ryan, about the empty room, about the call he didn't answer 3 days before his brother pulled the trigger, about every moment in his life when someone needed him to stay, and he followed orders instead. I promise, he said. But I'm not leaving. Ghost walked to the door and sat, facing outward, ears forward, amber eyes scanning the parking lot where Dale Cruz's truck had been. The dog's body was still, but his muscles held the particular readiness of an animal that understood, better than anyone in the room, that the night wasn't over. It was just changing shape. And somewhere in a small apartment 3 blocks away, a 7-year-old girl slept with a teddy bear pressed against her chest. A teddy bear that held the key to destroying a drug pipeline, exposing a killer, and proving that her mother didn't die by accident. She didn't die because she was weak. She died because she was brave enough to try to stop it. And now 2 strangers, a soldier and a medic, both carrying wars they couldn't put down, stood in a diner in a town that had been silent for too long, with a dog between them who had never once in his life looked away from a fight. The Redfords had been money and power. Dale Cruz was something different. Dale was poison. Quiet, patient, lethal. And he had just learned that the woman he'd been trying to silence had a combat veteran and a military canine standing between him and everything he needed to bury. He would come back, harder, smarter, more dangerous. And Cole Archer, who had driven into Ridgewood looking for nothing but a cup of coffee and a few hours of silence, tightened his grip on Ghost's leash and made peace with the fact that silence was over. for all of them. Cole drove Nora home because she wouldn't let him call an ambulance, and he wouldn't let her walk 3 blocks alone after what Dale Cruz had whispered at the door. Ghost sat in the back seat of the truck with his head near the open window, nostrils working the night air, cataloging every scent the way he cataloged everything. Automatically, thoroughly, without needing to be told. Nora didn't speak for the first 2 blocks. Cole didn't push. He'd learned in Afghanistan that silence after contact wasn't absence. It was processing. The body dumping adrenaline. The mind sorting threat from memory. The heart deciding whether to break now or later. "Turn left here," Nora said. "I know. You told me the address." "I didn't tell you the address." "Gloria did, while you were in the bathroom washing Dale's beer off your apron." Nora looked at him. "Gloria talks too much." "Gloria's scared for you. There's a difference." They pulled up to the apartment. Nora sat for a moment with her hand on the door handle, not moving. Ghost leaned forward from the back seat and pressed his nose against her shoulder. Light, brief, the canine equivalent of a hand on the arm. "He does that," Cole said, "when he thinks someone's carrying too much. Smart dog. Smarter than me most days." Nora opened the door and stepped out. Then she turned back. "You can come in. Meet Sophie." "But I swear to God, if you wake her up." "SEALs are trained to enter rooms without making sound. So are 7-year-olds who haven't slept through the night in 14 months. She hears everything." Mrs. Patterson met them at the apartment door. 68, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, the particular expression of a woman who had agreed to babysit and ended up watching the news and worrying. "She's been asleep since 8, Mrs. Patterson said. Didn't eat much, held that bear the whole evening." "Thank you, Eleanor." Mrs. Patterson looked at Cole, then at Ghost, then back at Nora with a question she was too polite to ask out loud. "He's a friend," Nora said. "Military friend?" "The kind that comes with an 85-pound German shepherd." "Well," Mrs. Patterson gathered her coat, "at least he's got good taste in dogs." She left. Nora locked the door. Twice. Habit. Cole stood in the small living room with Ghost at his side, taking in what the space told him without needing to look hard. The apartment was clean but spare. No decorations except 3 photographs on a shelf. Nora in uniform. A woman who looked like Nora but softer holding a baby. And a little girl blowing out candles on a cake with a number 5. "That's Lisa," Nora said, following his gaze. "And that's Sophie." "Before." "Before what?" "Before everything." A sound came from the bedroom, small feet on carpet. The door cracked open, and a face appeared. Dark curls, brown eyes too large for the face that held them. A child-sized wariness that no child should have learned yet. Sophie looked at Nora, then at Cole, then at Ghost. Her eyes locked on the dog and didn't move. "Aunt Nora?" "It's okay, baby. This is Cole. He's a friend." Sophie didn't look at Cole. She looked at Ghost. The German shepherd had lowered himself to the floor the moment the bedroom door opened. Not because Cole commanded it, but because the dog had identified what was in the doorway and adjusted. Chin on paws, tail still, amber eyes soft, patient, waiting. "Is he real?" Sophie whispered. "He's real," Cole said quietly. "His name is Ghost." "Can I touch him?" Cole looked at Nora. She nodded. "Ghost. Friend." The dog's tail moved once. Twice. Sophie crossed the room in bare feet and knelt beside him. Her small hand disappeared into the brown tan and black fur, and something happened that Cole hadn't seen in the 4 months since Kabul. Ghost's entire body relaxed. Not the alert stillness of a working dog, not the coiled readiness of an animal scanning for threats. Actual, complete relaxation. The dog exhaled, long and slow, and pressed his head against Sophie's knee. "He's warm," Sophie said. 2 words, spoken to a stranger. The first words Sophie Vega had said to anyone outside of Nora in over a year. Nora's hand went to her mouth. She turned away before Sophie could see, but Cole saw. He saw the tears she trapped behind her fingers, and the way her shoulders shook once before the discipline took over and locked everything back into place. "He likes you," Cole said to Sophie. "How do you know?" "Because he doesn't relax like that for anyone, not even me." Sophie looked up at Cole for the first time, reading him the way children read adults, not for words, but for safety, for the thing behind the face that told you whether the person could be trusted with the soft parts of you. "Are you a soldier?" she asked. "Yes." "My Aunt Nora was a soldier." "I know. She was a brave one." "She doesn't like to talk about it." "Most brave people don't." Sophie looked back at Ghost. "Can he stay?" "Sophie," Nora started. "He can stay tonight," Cole said. He looked at Nora. "If that's okay." Nora wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. "Ghost can stay. You sleep on the couch. And you're gone before she wakes up." "Copy that." Sophie fell asleep on the living room floor with her arms around Ghost's neck and her face buried in his fur. Cole lifted her without waking her, a skill he'd learned carrying wounded men through darkness, and placed her in bed. Ghost followed, positioned himself beside the bed, and didn't move again for the rest of the night. Cole sat on the couch. Nora sat in the kitchen. Between them, a silence that held everything they hadn't said yet. "The teddy bear," Cole said. "Where is it?" "In her room. She sleeps with it every night. Lisa gave it to her the week before she died." Nora's voice was steady but thin. "I found the drive 6 months ago. I was sewing a rip in the bear's back and felt something hard inside the stuffing. A USB drive wrapped in electrical tape." "Did you look at it?" "I looked at it." Nora paused. "Financial records, 3 years of transactions. Supply routes from the southern border through Denver, then distributed to small towns across Colorado, Wyoming, and Nebraska. Payment records to mules, distributors, and, this is the part that made me sick, monthly payments to someone listed only as RT. RT. Roy Tillman, the sheriff. Cole sat forward. "The sheriff is on Dale's payroll?" "Not exactly. Tillman isn't corrupt the way you think. He's not getting rich. He's being controlled." Nora met Cole's eyes. "Dale has a video of Tillman's son, 17 years old, a kid, buying pills from one of Dale's guys. If Tillman talks, if he acts, if he does anything resembling his actual job, that video goes public. His son gets charged. His family gets destroyed." "So Tillman looks the other way?" "Tillman has been looking the other way for 5 years, and every day he does, more product flows through Ridgewood. More people die, and the silence gets thicker." Cole processed this the way he processed intelligence briefings. Fast, structural, looking for the weak point. "You've had this drive for 6 months. Why haven't you turned it over?" Nora laughed. It was the most bitter sound Cole had heard since the tarmac in Kabul. "Turn it over to who? The sheriff is compromised. The county attorney plays golf with Dale every Saturday. The state police field office is 40 miles away and understaffed and doesn't prioritize small-town drug cases because they've got bigger problems. DEA. I don't know anyone in the DEA. I'm a waitress with PTSD and a custody arrangement that could collapse if anyone decides I'm unstable. If I go public with this drive, Dale finds out. And if Dale finds out..." She stopped. "He comes for Sophie." He's already coming for Sophie. You heard what he said in the diner. He knows I have something. He doesn't know what or where, but he knows Lisa talked to me before she died. And he's been waiting for me to make a move so he can justify whatever he's planning to do. What's he planning? CPS. An anonymous report questioning my fitness as a guardian. He's done it before. Not to me, but to other people who got too close. A woman named Carla Reed tried to go to the county about the drugs 3 years ago. Within a week, she had CPS at her door, a code violation on her house, and her kids in emergency foster care. She left town and never came back. That's not a drug dealer. That's a system. That's Ridgewood. That's what happens when one man controls the money, the property, the leases, and the sheriff. You don't need to be a cartel. You just need to be the only employer in a dying town. Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Nora asked. "Calling someone who can help." "Who?" "A friend, former SEAL. He works DEA intelligence now." "Cole, you can't just—" "I can. I am." He dialed. It rang 4 times. "Drake?" "Leo, it's Cole Archer." A pause. Cole Archer. The Cole Archer who's supposed to be driving to Montana and grieving like a normal person? "I need a favor." "Last time you needed a favor, I spent 6 weeks in a shipping container in Yemen." "This is domestic." "That's somehow worse. Talk." "A name. Dale Cruz, Ridgewood, Colorado. Runs a fentanyl pipeline through small towns across 3 states. Uses an auto parts shop as a front. Controls the local sheriff through blackmail. A woman died 14 months ago, Lisa Vega, listed as accidental overdose, who was keeping his books and was about to talk. Leo was quiet for 3 seconds. "How deep are you?" "Deep enough that he threatened a 7-year-old girl in front of me tonight." "Cole." "There's a USB drive. Financial records, supply routes, payment schedules, 3 years of operations." "I haven't seen it yet, but the source is credible." "Who's the source?" "Lisa Vega's sister, former Army combat medic, 2 tours. She's been sitting on it for 6 months because she has no one to give it to." Leo exhaled slowly. "Cole, that name, Cruz, it's already in a file." "What file?" "An active investigation. 18 months. Multi-state pipeline. We've been building it from the distribution end, but we can't crack the local node. We know the product flows through small towns in Colorado, but the street-level operation is insulated. No one talks. No witnesses. No cooperating defendants. Because the witnesses are being silenced, blackmailed, run out of town." "That tracks. We've had 3 potential informants go dark in the last year, all from small communities. All stopped returning calls." Leo paused. "If your source has financial records from inside the operation, actual ledgers, actual routes, that's not just helpful. That's the piece we've been missing for a year." "How fast can you move?" "I need to loop in the case agent, Sarah Kent. She's solid. Been on this since the beginning. Give me 12 hours. "We may not have 12 hours. Cruz knows the sister has something. He's escalating." "Then keep your head down and your dog close. I'll call you by morning." Cole hung up. Nora was watching him from the kitchen with an expression he recognized. The look of someone who had been holding a weight alone for so long that the idea of sharing it felt more terrifying than carrying it. "DEA has an active investigation," Cole said. 18 months. Dale's pipeline is already on their radar. They just can't crack the local end because nobody will talk." "Nobody can talk." "You can." Cole met her eyes. "Lisa's drive is the missing piece, Nora. 3 years of financials from inside the operation. That's not a tip. That's a conviction. And if Dale finds out before the DEA moves, he'll come for Sophie." He's already coming for Sophie. You said it yourself. The difference is whether you wait for him to make the first move, or you end it before he can.
You make it sound simple.
It's not simple, but it's clear. Cole paused. The simple things never are. The clear things always are. Nora sat with that. She looked at the bedroom door, where her niece slept beside an 85-pound military working dog that she'd spoken to before she'd spoken to any human being in 14 months. She thought about Lisa's voice on the phone at 2 a.m., shaking, terrified, determined. She thought about the USB drive inside a teddy bear that a 7-year-old girl held every night because it was the last thing her mother gave her.
If I do this, Nora said slowly, and it goes wrong, if Dale moves before the DEA does, you take Sophie. That's the deal. That's the only deal.
Nora, promise me, on your brother's name. The words hit Cole like shrapnel. Ryan's name. Ryan, who had put a gun to his own head because the world got quiet, and the quiet was louder than the bombs. Ryan, whose ashes sat in a box in Montana, waiting for a brother who kept finding reasons not to arrive. I promise, Cole said. On Ryan's name, but it won't come to that. You don't know that. I know what a combat medic and a Navy SEAL and a German Shepherd can do when they decide something matters enough to protect. And I know what the DEA can do when someone finally gives them what they need to move. He looked at the bedroom door. That little girl in there spoke tonight. First time in over a year. She spoke because Ghost walked in, and she felt safe enough to open her mouth. That's not nothing. That's everything. Nora's eyes filled. She pressed her palms together until the tremor stopped. Okay, she said. Okay? I'll get the drive. In the morning, when Sophie's at school. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when Sophie's safe and Dale Cruz is in a cell. The phone rang at 6:47 the next morning. Nora answered it, her voice still rough with the 2 hours of sleep she'd managed. Ms. Vega, this is Rachel Dunn with the County Child Protective Services office. Nora's blood went cold. Yes? We've received an anonymous report regarding the welfare of a minor in your care. Sophie Vega, age 7. We're required to conduct a home assessment within 48 hours. On what grounds? The report cites concerns about the child's living environment, the guardian's mental health history, and potential exposure to unsafe individuals. Unsafe individuals? The report mentions the presence of an unregistered animal and an unidentified male at the residence. Nora looked at Cole, who was already awake, already listening. Ghost, already on his feet. When was this report filed? Nora asked. This morning, 6:15 a.m. 32 minutes ago. Before the CPS office was even officially open. Someone had called it in as a priority, and someone had made sure it was processed immediately. That kind of speed didn't come from concerned neighbors. It came from leverage. I'll be available for the assessment, Nora said, her voice steady despite the fire in her chest. Name the time. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. I'll be here. She hung up. The phone felt like a weapon in her hand, pointed at her. Dale, she said. How fast did he move? CPS called at 6:47. The report was filed at 6:15. Dale walked out of that diner at 7:30 last night. That means he made the call this morning, first thing, before most people have had their coffee. Nora's jaw tightened. He's not messing around. He's going directly at Sophie. Cole's expression didn't change, but something behind it shifted, the way a machine shifts when a new gear engages. Calm to cold, concerned to operational. What grounds? My mental health, my living situation, and the presence of an unregistered animal and an unidentified male. She looked at him. That's you and Ghost. He's using last night, our presence in your apartment.
He's using everything. He doesn't need the CPS case to succeed. He just needs it to exist. An open investigation puts my custody in question. If my custody is in question, a judge can place Sophie in emergency foster care. And if Sophie's in foster care, you lose leverage. You can't think about the drive. You can't cooperate with the DEA. You spend every second fighting to get her back. And Dale buys time.
Months, maybe longer. Nora's hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from rage. The controlled, focused rage of a woman who had spent 2 years in a war zone, learning the difference between panic and purpose. This is what he did to Carla Reed. This is the playbook. CPS, code violations, custody threats. He doesn't need to hurt me. He just needs to take Sophie. He's not taking Sophie. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it. Cole pulled out his phone. Leo said 12 hours. It's been 8. I'm not waiting. He dialed. Leo answered on the second ring. I was about to call you. Dale's moving. CPS complaint filed this morning against Nora. He's going after the child. How fast? Assessment tomorrow at 9. Leo cursed under his breath. Okay. I looped in Sarah Kent last night. She's ready. But Cole, the USB drive. We need it before we can move. Without it, all we have is an 18-month investigation with no inside documentation.
Kent can't get warrants, can't make arrests, can't shut down the pipeline without hard evidence from inside the operation. Nora's getting the drive this morning. Then get it to Kent today. I'm sending you her secure contact. She's in Denver, 90 minutes from you. If she has the drive by tonight, she can have warrants by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning is the CPS assessment. Then the timing works. If Kent moves on Dale before 9 a.m. tomorrow, the CPS complaint becomes irrelevant. The person who filed it will be in federal custody. And if something goes wrong? Then you do what SEALs do. You improvise. Cole hung up. Nora was already moving towards Sophie's room. I'll get the drive, she said. Sophie takes the bear to school. I'll have to get it before she leaves. Can you do it without her noticing? Nora stopped at the bedroom door. I've been extracting shrapnel from screaming men in a combat zone while mortar rounds fell around us. I can remove a USB drive from a teddy bear without waking a 7-year-old. She was right. It took her 4 minutes. She came out of the bedroom with a small drive in her palm, wrapped in electrical tape, exactly the way Lisa had hidden it. Lisa, who had been a terrified bookkeeper with a drug habit and a daughter she loved, and the kind of desperate courage that drives ordinary people to do extraordinary things when the alternative is to watch the world burn. Nora held the drive up. 3 years, every transaction, every route, every name. That's enough to end him. That's enough to end all of them, Nora paused. Lisa died for this. She didn't know she was dying for it, but she was. And if I let it stay inside a stuffed bear, while more people die from the same poison that killed her, you're doing the right thing. I'm doing the only thing. Cole reached for his phone to text Kent's contact. Ghost stood at the front window, body rigid, ears forward. The dog's head tracked something outside. Slow, deliberate, the way he tracked movement on patrol. Cole, Nora said. He was already beside Ghost. Through the window, a black SUV idled at the curb. Tinted windows, engine running. It sat there for 30 seconds, then pulled away slowly, deliberately, making sure they saw it. That's the 3rd time, Mrs. Patterson said from across the hall, her door cracked open. Started this morning, 5:30, back and forth, same vehicle. Thank you, Eleanor, Nora said. Lock your door. Already did, honey. I may be old, but I'm not stupid. Cole looked at Nora. He's watching the apartment. He's watching Sophie. Then we move today,
Not tonight, today. Cole sent the text to Kent's secure number. 3 words. We have it. The response came in 11 seconds. Denver, 4 p.m. I'll be at the Federal Building. Bring everything. Cole showed Nora the screen. She read it and nodded. One sharp, decisive nod. The kind medics give before they cut. I'll need someone to watch Sophie after school, Nora said. Gloria? Gloria's at the diner until 6. Mrs. Patterson? Eleanor is 68 and brave, but she can't protect Sophie if Dale sends someone. Cole looked at Ghost. The dog looked back at him with amber eyes that asked the only question that mattered. Ghost stays with Sophie, Cole said. I'll drive you to Denver. Ghost stays here. You'd leave your dog? I'd leave my dog with the only person he's chosen to protect since Kabul. Cole crouched beside Ghost and put both hands on the dog's face. You stay. You guard. Nobody gets near her. Ghost's tail moved once. Acknowledgement. Assignment accepted. He understands? Nora asked. He understood before I said it. Cole stood. He's been guarding that little girl since the moment she touched his fur. He chose her. That's not something you train. That's something that happens when a dog decides someone belongs to him. Nora looked at the bedroom door. Sophie would wake up soon. She would reach for her teddy bear, and it would feel lighter. A tiny difference that a 7-year-old might not notice, or might notice and say nothing about, because Sophie had learned, at an age when children should be learning to ride bikes and tell jokes, that the things you loved could be taken without warning, and the only safe response was silence. I'll tell her Ghost is staying for the day, Nora said. She won't argue. No, she won't. Nora held the USB drive in her fist. Small, hard. The weight of 3 years of evidence and 14 months of silence, and one woman's courage compressed into a piece of plastic smaller than her thumb. Lisa, she whispered. Not to Cole. Not to Ghost. To the sister who had called at 2 a.m. and said she was going to do the right thing, and died for it before anyone could help her. I'm finishing it. And the black SUV circled the block one more time, slow and certain, while inside the apartment, a German shepherd took his position beside a sleeping child's bed and did not move, because he had received his orders, and they were the same orders he had followed his entire life. Stay. Guard. Don't let anyone through. The dog understood. He always had. And 1,400 miles away, in a box in Montana, the ashes of a man named Ryan Archer waited for a brother who was finally learning the lesson Ryan had died trying to teach him. That the worst thing a soldier can do isn't fail. It's walk away. Cole drove 90 minutes to Denver, with Nora in the passenger seat and the USB drive in her jacket pocket, pressed against her ribs like a second heartbeat. She kept her hand over it the entire drive. Not because she thought it would fall out, but because her body needed to know it was still there. That Lisa's last act of courage hadn't evaporated somewhere between Ridgewood and the highway. Neither of them spoke for the first 30 miles. The silence wasn't empty. It was loaded, the way a weapon is loaded, full of things that would fire when the time came. Tell me about Ryan, Nora said, somewhere past the halfway mark. Cole's hands adjusted on the wheel. Why? Because you're driving 90 minutes to hand a dead woman's evidence to the DEA for a town you've never heard of and a waitress you met 12 hours ago. And the only explanation you've given me is a dead brother. So tell me about him. Cole was quiet for a mile. Then 2. Ryan was 2 years older than me. Joined the teams first. He was the reason I became a SEAL. Not because he recruited me, but because I watched him come home from his first deployment, and he was different. Sharper. Calmer. Like the war had burned away everything that wasn't essential, and left behind someone who knew exactly who he was. Cole paused. I wanted that. The clarity. Did you get it? I got the opposite. 3 tours. Each one took something. By the end, I didn't know who I was. I just knew how to function. He glanced at her. You know what I mean. I know exactly what you mean. Ryan got out before me, 18 months earlier. He moved to Montana, bought a cabin, said he was going to fish and read and figure out what the rest of his life looked like. Cole's voice dropped. He called me every week for the first 6 months, then every other week, then once a month. The calls got shorter, the silences got longer. I told myself he was adjusting, finding his rhythm. But he wasn't. He was drowning. And I was in Kabul, pretending I couldn't hear it, because hearing it meant I'd have to do something about it. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to save someone who wasn't bleeding. Nora looked at the road ahead. Combat medics have the same problem. We're trained for the wounds we can see. The ones we can't see kill more people than bullets ever did. 3 weeks ago, Ryan called me. Middle of the night. I was driving. I'd just left the base, final out processing, headed nowhere in particular. His name came up on the screen, and I didn't answer. Cole's knuckles went white on the wheel. I didn't answer because I was tired, and I figured I'd call him back in the morning. Cole. He left a voicemail, 11 seconds. All he said was, I just wanted to hear your voice, brother. I love you. By the time I called back, it was too late. The truck was quiet. The highway hummed beneath them. His ashes are in Montana, Cole said. In a box in a cabin that nobody's opened since the police cleared the scene. I've been driving toward them for 3 weeks and finding every reason in the world to stop somewhere else. That's not avoidance. That's grief. It's both, and I don't know how to separate them, Cole exhaled. But I know this. Ryan died because nobody was there when he needed someone to stay. Nobody showed up. Nobody pushed through the door, and I'm done being the person who doesn't show up. Nora reached across the console and put her hand on his forearm. Brief, firm. The touch of a combat medic who had spent years learning that sometimes the most important intervention wasn't a tourniquet. It was contact. Lisa called me too, Nora said. 3 weeks before she died. 2 a.m. She was terrified and rambling, and she told me everything. The books, the routes, the names. She said she was going to tell someone. She said she had proof. Nora pulled her hand back. I told her to be careful. That's all I said. Be careful. I didn't say come to me. I didn't say let me help. I didn't say I'll be there in an hour. You couldn't have known. I knew she was in danger. I knew the kind of people she was dealing with. And I told her to be careful instead of driving through the night and pulling her out. Nora's voice cracked for the first time. Just a hairline fracture, barely audible. 3 weeks later, she was dead. And I've spent 14 months carrying the same guilt you carry. The call we didn't answer. The door we didn't open. So we opened this one. Yeah, we opened this one. Agent Sarah Kent met them in a conference room on the 4th floor of the Federal Building. She was early 40s, sharp-featured, wearing the practiced neutrality of a woman who had spent years building cases that took longer to construct than most people's patience allowed. A man with a laptop sat beside her. Forensic analyst, no introduction, already working. Commander Archer, Ms. Vega. Kent shook their hands and gestured to seats. Leo Drake briefed me last night. I appreciate you coming in. We didn't have a choice, Nora said. Dale Cruz filed a CPS complaint against me this morning. Assessment tomorrow at 9. Kent's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes sharpened. That's faster than expected. He knows I have something. He doesn't know what or where, but he knows Lisa talked to me before she died, and he's been circling for 14 months, waiting for me to move. And you moved. He grabbed me in a diner and threatened my niece. I stopped waiting. Nora pulled the USB drive from her pocket and set it on the table. Small, wrapped in electrical tape. The sum total of a dead woman's bravery, compressed into a piece of plastic that weighed less than a house key. Kent looked at it, then at Nora.
Your sister compiled this?
Lisa was Dale's bookkeeper. She kept records of everything: transactions, supply routes, distribution points, payments. 3 years of operations. Nora pushed the drive forward. She hid it in my niece's teddy bear. I found it 6 months ago. Why didn't you come to us sooner? Because the sheriff is compromised. The county attorney plays golf with Dale. The state police are understaffed. And I'm a waitress with PTSD, raising a 7-year-old who doesn't speak. And every system I've ever trusted has either failed me or tried to take something from me. Nora held Kent's gaze. You're the first person with a badge who hasn't already been bought. Kent absorbed that without flinching. She nodded to the analyst, who took the drive with gloved hands, inserted it into a secure laptop, and began working. If this contains what you say it does, Kent said, we can move within 24 hours. Our investigation has been running 18 months. We have the distribution network mapped from Denver outward. What we've been missing is documentation from inside the local node. The financials that prove Dale Cruz is the hub. That drive is the hub, the analyst spoke for the first time. I'm seeing structured financial data, transaction logs, dates going back 3 years. He scrolled, eyes moving fast. There are payment codes with initials. RT appears monthly, consistent amounts, 5,000 each. DC appears on every supply entry. DC is Dale Cruz, Nora said. RT is Roy Tillman, the sheriff. You're certain? My sister told me, 3 weeks before she died. Kent leaned back. Ms. Vega, if we can corroborate these records with our existing intelligence, this isn't just enough for warrants. This is enough for a RICO case. Federal racketeering.
That puts Dale Cruz away for decades, not years.
What about the sheriff?
If Tillman's receiving payments, he's exposed. But you said he's being blackmailed?
Dale has a video of Tillman's son buying pills. Tillman's not corrupt by choice. He's corrupt by coercion. Kent considered this. That changes his exposure. If Tillman cooperates, if he testifies to the blackmail and provides corroborating testimony, he may be looking at immunity rather than charges.
He won't cooperate, Cole said. He's too scared.
Everyone's scared until the alternative is worse. Kent stood. Here's what I need from you. Go back to Ridgewood. Act normal. Don't confront Dale. Don't contact the sheriff. Let the CPS assessment happen tomorrow. It buys us time and keeps Dale thinking his strategy is working. You want me to let them into my home and evaluate whether I'm fit to raise my niece while the man who killed my sister sits 3 blocks away pulling strings? I want you to let them in because by the time they finish their assessment, federal agents will be executing warrants at Dale Cruz' auto shop, his home, and every distribution point on that drive. Kent paused. The CPS case dies the moment Dale is in custody. No complainant, no case. And if something goes wrong, if Dale moves before you do? Kent looked at Cole. That's why Commander Archer and his dog are going back with you. The dog is already there, Cole said. He's guarding Sophie. For the first time, Kent's professional composure softened, just a fraction. Smart deployment. He's a smart dog. They drove back to Ridgewood in the dark. The highway was empty, the kind of emptiness that made you feel like the last 2 people left in a world that had given up and gone to sleep. She believed me, Nora said. Kent? She didn't question the drive. She didn't ask if I was sure. She didn't look at me like I was an unstable waitress with a conspiracy theory. Nora's voice had a quality Cole hadn't heard before. Not relief, not hope, something quieter. Recognition. 14 months I've been carrying this, And the first person who actually listened was a federal agent who's been looking for the same thing I've been holding. Sometimes the door is locked from both sides. That's either profound or stupid. It's something Ryan used to say. He was both. Nora almost smiled. I think I would have liked Ryan. He would have liked you. He have a thing for people who carried impossible weights and refused to put them down. That's every combat medic I know. That's every person worth knowing. They pulled into Ridgewood at 8:30. The town was dark and quiet. The artificial quiet that Cole had learned to distrust. The quiet that existed because the people who made noise had been taught to stop. Nora's phone buzzed as they parked. A text from Mrs. Patterson. Sophie asleep. Ghost hasn't moved. That dog is a better babysitter than me. She's okay, Nora said, exhaling. She's more than okay. She's got an 85-pound security detail who hasn't taken a bathroom break in 10 hours. He hasn't. Ghost can hold it for 18 hours. We tested it in Kandahar. Not on purpose. They walked to the apartment. Nora unlocked the door, twice, habit, and stepped inside. Ghost was exactly where Cole had left him, beside Sophie's bed, chin on paws, amber eyes open. The dog's tail moved when he saw Cole, but he didn't stand. He didn't leave his post. The assignment wasn't over until the handler said it was. Stand down, buddy, Cole said softly. I've got it. Ghost rose, stretched with the particular deliberation of a dog who had been stationary for 10 hours and wanted everyone to know it, and walked to Cole. He pressed his head against Cole's thigh for 3 seconds. Report delivered, mission complete. Then walked to his water bowl and drank for 45 seconds straight. Okay, Nora admitted. I'm impressed.
Don't tell him that. His ego's already unmanageable. Sophie was asleep, bare in her arms, lighter now by the weight of a USB drive, though she hadn't seemed to notice, or if she had, she hadn't said. Nora stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her niece breathe, counting the rise and fall, the way she counted everything, with the attention of a woman who knew how quickly breathing could stop. Tomorrow, Nora whispered. Not to Cole, not to Ghost, to Lisa, to the sister who had died holding the secret that was finally, after 14 months, in the hands of people who could use it. Tomorrow it ends. Cole's phone buzzed at 5:45 a.m. Leo Drake. Kent's got the warrants. FBI and DEA joint operation. They're moving at 7 a.m. That's an hour and 15 minutes. They're already staging. Teams from Denver, plus state police tactical. They're hitting the auto shop, Dale's home, and 2 distribution points simultaneously. Kent wanted you to know. Stay inside. Keep Nora and the girl at the apartment. Let the operation run. What about the sheriff? Kent's people are approaching Tillman separately, offering cooperation in exchange for testimony about the blackmail. If he agrees, he's a witness, not a defendant. And if he doesn't, then he's a defendant. But Cole, Kent thinks he'll cooperate. She said men who are coerced usually break toward the truth when someone finally gives them permission. Let's hope she's right. She's been right about everything else for 18 months. Trust the process. I trust Kent. I don't trust the process. I trust people. Same thing, when the people are good. Cole hung up. Nora was already awake, standing in the kitchen, coffee untouched, arms crossed. She'd heard enough. 7 a.m., she said. 7 a.m., joint operation, FBI and DEA. And the CPS assessment is at 9. If Kent's timing holds, Dale will be in federal custody before the CPS worker knocks on your door. If. They waited. The longest hour of Nora's life. Longer than the firefight outside Kandahar, where Amy Chen bled out in her arms. Longer than the night she found Lisa on the bathroom floor. Longer than every sleepless night since Sophie came to live with her,
and the world narrowed to the space between a child's heartbeat and a dead sister's ghost. Sophie woke at 6:30.
She padded into the kitchen, saw Cole and Ghost, and went directly to the dog. She sat on the floor beside him and leaned her head against his shoulder without a word. "Good morning, baby," Nora said. "Morning." Sophie looked up. "Ghost stayed all night?" "He stayed all night." "He didn't leave?" "He never left." Sophie considered this with the grave seriousness of a child who had learned, far too young, that the people who promised to stay were usually the first ones gone. "Good," she said. "He should always stay." At 6:58, Nora's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. "Ms. Vega, this is Agent Kent. We're executing in 2 minutes. Stay inside. Do not leave the apartment." "Understood." "One more thing. The analysis of the drive is complete. Your sister's records documented not just the pipeline. They documented payments to a county judge, Judge Raymond Cross. He's been dismissing drug cases connected to Dale's operation for 3 years. That's judicial corruption, federal charges, and it means every case he dismissed gets reopened." Nora's legs nearly buckled. "How many cases?" 47, including 6 overdose deaths that were ruled accidental with no investigation, including your sister's. The phone shook in Nora's hand. Cole stepped closer. Ghost pressed against Sophie, reading the room the way he read every room, with absolute attention and the willingness to act on what he found. "Lisa's death will be reinvestigated?" Nora whispered. "As a potential homicide. The contaminated batch that killed her and 5 others can now be traced directly to Dale's supply chain. If we can prove he knew the batch was contaminated and distributed it anyway..." "He knew. Lisa told me he knew. She said he called it cleaning inventory." Kent was quiet for a beat. "That's enough, Ms. Vega. We're going to get him. All of it. Everything he built, everything he buried, everyone he bought. Your sister made this possible." "I know," Nora said. "I know she did." At 7 a.m. exactly, Ridgewood woke up to the sound it had been waiting for and dreading in equal measure. The sound of sirens that weren't passing through. Cole stood at the window. Ghost stood beside him. Nora held Sophie on her lap at the kitchen table, the girl's face pressed against her chest, small hands gripping her shirt. "What's happening?" Sophie asked. "The good guys are here, baby." "Are they catching the bad guys?" "Yeah, they're catching them right now." "All of them?" Nora kissed the top of her head. All of them. Federal vehicles filled Main Street. Tactical teams hit the auto shop at 7:01. Dale's residence at 7:03. 2 distribution points at 7:05 and 7:07. Coordinated, simultaneous. The kind of operation that left no gaps, no exits, no room for the silence to swallow the truth one more time. Dale Cruz was pulled from his house in handcuffs at 7:12. He didn't fight. Men like Dale never fought when the odds were real. They only fought when the room was rigged in their favor. Without the sheriff, without the judge, without the silence that had protected him for 3 years, Dale Cruz was exactly what he had always been underneath the power. Small. Sheriff Roy Tillman was approached at his home by Agent Kent personally. She sat across from him at his kitchen table, showed him the payment records with his initials, and said, "You have a choice, Sheriff, right now. The only one that matters." Tillman looked at the documents. He looked at his wife standing in the doorway. He looked at the photograph of his son on the refrigerator. 17, smiling, holding a baseball trophy from a life that existed before Dale Cruz turned a teenager's mistake into a leash. "My boy," Tillman said, his voice breaking, "he made one mistake. One. And that man used it to own me for 5 years." "I know," Kent said. "Cooperate now, and we protect your son. Full immunity for the purchase. Sealed records. He keeps his future." "And me?"
That depends on what you tell me and how much of it is true. Tillman was quiet for 10 seconds. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a folder he'd kept hidden for 3 years, and set it on the table. Everything, he said. I'll tell you everything. At 8:55 a.m., 5 minutes before the CPS assessment was scheduled, Nora's phone rang. Ms. Vega, this is Rachel Dunn with CPS. I'm calling to inform you that the anonymous complaint regarding Sophie Vega has been withdrawn. Withdrawn by whom? The complainant has been identified as Dale Cruz, who is currently in federal custody. Given the circumstances, the complaint has been classified as fraudulent and the case is closed. No assessment will be conducted. A pause. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Miss Vega. Nora hung up. She set the phone down on the table, very carefully, the way she set instruments down after a surgery, with the precision of someone who understood that the operation was over, but the patient still needed watching. Then she put her face in her hands and cried. Not the silent tears she'd been swallowing for 14 months, not the controlled, hidden grief she performed in bathrooms and hallways and dark rooms where Sophie couldn't see. Real crying. The kind that shakes the body and steals the breath and sounds like something breaking open that has been sealed too long. Sophie climbed off her chair and wrapped her arms around Nora's neck. It's okay, Aunt Nora, Sophie said. The bad guys are gone. Yeah, baby. Nora held her knees so tight that their heartbeats merged. The bad guys are gone. Ghost walked to them and pressed his body against both of them. A wall of brown tan and black fur and 85 pounds of loyalty that had been forged in combat and refined by love into something that no training manual had ever anticipated. Cole stood by the window, watching the federal vehicles move through Ridgewood like a river finding its course after a dam breaks. He didn't join the embrace. He didn't need to. Some moments belonged to the people who had earned them through suffering, and his role in this one was simpler and older than any mission he'd ever run. He was the man who stayed. And across town, in a holding cell where the silence no longer protected him, Dale Cruz sat with his head in his hands and understood, for the first time in his life, what it felt like to be the one who was powerless. While the town he had strangled for 3 years began, breath by breath, to remember what it sounded like to speak. The days after Dale's arrest moved through Ridgewood like water through a cracked dam. Slow at first, then all at once. People who hadn't spoken in years started speaking. Doors that had been locked out of fear opened out of relief. And the silence that had suffocated the town for 3 years began to dissolve. Not with a single dramatic break, but with 1,000 small acts of ordinary courage that had been waiting for permission. Tom Bennett was the first. He walked into the temporary federal field office set up at the community center, sat down across from Agent Kent, and said, I've been watching that man operate for 3 years. I'm 74 years old, and I've got nothing left to lose. Where do you want me to start? Kent told him to start at the beginning. Tom talked for 2 hours. He named businesses Dale had pressured, families who had left in the night, workers who had been fired for asking questions, a mechanic named Paul Driscoll who had found packages in vehicles brought to Dale's shop for repair and had confronted Dale about it. And 2 weeks later, Paul's garage burned down. Ruled electrical. No investigation. I knew, Tom said when he was finished. The whole town knew. We just didn't have the guts to say it out loud. You're saying it now, Kent replied. That counts. Does it? After 3 years of keeping my mouth shut while people died? It counts, Mr. Bennett. Every word. Maria Gonzalez came next, the night nurse who was always too tired to talk. Turned out, she wasn't too tired. She was too afraid. She'd treated overdose patients at the clinic for 2 years and noticed the pattern before anyone else did. Same product, Same symptoms, same neighborhoods. She'd filed a report with the county health department 8 months ago. The report disappeared. "I called the health department 3 times," Maria said. "The third time, a man called me back." "Not from the department. He said my nursing license was under review and suggested I focus on my patients instead of my theories." She paused. "I knew it was Dale's people. I stopped calling." "The man who called you," Kent said. "Do you remember the voice?" "I'll never forget it. Calm, professional, like he was reading from a script." Kent showed her a photo lineup. Maria pointed to Judge Raymond Cross's clerk without hesitation. The puzzle was assembling itself, not from the top down, from the ground up. Every person who walked through that door carried a piece that had been hidden, buried, or stolen. And piece by piece, the picture of Dale Cruz's empire emerged in a detail that no single investigation could have produced. Dale had controlled Ridgewood through 3 systems. Money. He owned the commercial leases that kept businesses alive or killed them. Fear. He used surveillance, threats, and CPS complaints to neutralize anyone who pushed back. And silence. He had purchased, through Judge Cross and Sheriff Tillman, the institutions that were supposed to protect the people he was destroying. Lisa Vega's USB drive was the skeleton key. Kent's forensic team had decrypted the full contents within 48 hours, and what they found went beyond what even Nora had imagined. Kent called Nora into the field office on the 3rd day. Cole came with her. Ghost stayed with Sophie, an arrangement that had become automatic, the dog and the girl forming a unit that operated on its own logic, independent of the adults who thought they were making the decisions. "Sit down," Kent said. Her voice had changed, not softer, but weighted with something that required careful delivery. "What is it?" Nora asked. "Your sister's records are more comprehensive than we initially assessed. Lisa didn't just track the finances. She tracked the product." Kent opened a file. "She documented batch numbers, distribution dates, and, this is the critical part, quality control notes." Quality control? Lisa recorded when batches tested positive for contamination. Specifically, fentanyl mixed with higher concentration analogs that dramatically increased lethality. Kent met Nora's eyes. She flagged 3 batches over a 2-year period as dangerous. Each flag included a note that she had informed Dale directly. Nora's breathing stopped. She told him. She documented telling him. Dates, times, his responses. For the first 2 batches, Dale's response was, and this is Lisa's handwriting, "Move it fast, price it low, different zip code." He deliberately distributed contaminated product to areas outside his immediate territory to avoid local attention. "And the 3rd batch?" Kent paused. "The 3rd batch is the one that killed your sister." The room contracted. Cole felt it. The air thinning, the walls pressing inward, the particular gravity that occurs when a truth you've carried as suspicion suddenly becomes fact. "Lisa's notes for the 3rd batch are dated October 12th, Kent continued. She flagged it as the most contaminated she'd ever seen. She wrote that she told Dale it would kill people. His response, documented in her handwriting, "Then it'll sell itself." Nora stood up. "Not fast. Slow, careful. The way you stand when the ground has shifted and you're not sure it's finished moving." She walked to the wall, put both hands flat against it, pressed her forehead to the surface, and breathed. Cole didn't move. He didn't touch her. He knew what this was. The moment when grief transforms into something harder, sharper, more permanent. Not the grief of loss, the grief of confirmation. The absolute, irreversible knowledge that the person you loved was murdered by someone who knew what he was doing and did it anyway. "He knew," Nora said, her voice muffled against the wall. "He knew the batch was lethal, and he sold it anyway."
And when Lisa tried to stop him, he gave it to her.
We believe so, Kent said carefully. The timeline supports it. Lisa flagged the batch on October 12th. She died on October 19th. The batch entered distribution on October 15th. 6 people died, including Lisa. The remaining product was pulled on October 22nd, after the deaths, not before. That's not negligent homicide, Cole said. That's murder. The legal classification will depend on what we can prove about intent versus recklessness. But Commander Archer is correct. This is no longer a drug trafficking case. This is a potential murder case. Multiple victims. And Lisa Vega's documentation is the foundation. Nora turned around. Her face was dry.
The tears had come and gone in the space between one breath and the next, processed and filed the way a medic processes trauma. Quickly, completely, so the hands can keep working. "What do you need from me?" she asked.
I need you to testify. Not today, not this week, but when the grand jury convenes, and it will convene. I need you to tell them what Lisa told you on that phone call.
I need you to explain how you found the drive, what you knew, and why you waited 14 months to come forward.
I waited because I was afraid. I know, and the jury will understand that. Fear doesn't disqualify testimony. It authenticates it. What about Mitch? Cole asked. The youngest one, from the diner. Kent leaned back. Mitchell Grady is an interesting case. 22 years old, no prior felonies, low-level involvement in the distribution network, mostly deliveries, muscle work, intimidation. He's been in custody since the raid. He's a kid, Nora said. He was scared in that diner. When Ghost growled, he sat down before the others did. He's also the weakest link in Dale's organization. And weak links are where chains break. Kent pulled out a separate file. We've offered Mitch a cooperation agreement. Full testimony about the local operation, distribution points, payment schedules, Dale's personal involvement in the diner incident, and the threats against you and Sophie. Will he take it? He hasn't decided yet. He's scared of Dale, even in custody. The kind of loyalty that's built on fear doesn't disappear just because the source is behind bars. Cole thought about this. The scared kid in the diner who had laughed because the other two laughed and shut up when the math changed. 22 years old. Old enough to know better, young enough to be saved. Let me talk to him, Cole said. Kent raised an eyebrow. That's not standard procedure. Neither is a Navy SEAL handing you a drug case because a waitress with a teddy bear drive asked for help. Let me talk to him. Kent studied Cole for a long moment. Then she nodded. 20 minutes. I'll be watching through the glass. Mitch Grady looked smaller in the interview room than he had in the diner. The bravado was gone, stripped away by 48 hours in a federal holding facility where the only sounds were doors closing and lawyers talking in voices too low to decode. He sat with his hands flat on the table, thumbs touching. The posture of a man trying to hold himself together by making sure all his pieces were still in the same place. He looked up when Cole walked in. Recognition flickered. The man from the diner, the fatigues, the dog. Mitch's face went pale.
"I don't have my dog with me," Cole said, pulling out a chair. "Just me."
Am I supposed to feel better? You're supposed to feel whatever you feel, and then make a decision. Cole sat down. How old are you, Mitch? 22. When I was 22, I was in Afghanistan. First deployment. I thought I knew everything. I didn't know anything. Cole paused. You remind me of a lot of guys I served with. Young. Following orders.
Not asking why, because asking why meant you might have to do something about the answer.
I'm not military. No, but you followed a man who told you what to do, and you did it because it was easier than thinking for yourself. That's the same thing. The uniform's just different. Mitch looked at the table. I didn't touch her. In the diner. I didn't grab her. No, you laughed. You watched. You stood by while Dale Cruz put his hands on a woman and threatened her 7-year-old niece. Cole leaned forward. You know what that makes you? Mitch didn't answer. It makes you complicit, but it doesn't make you Dale, and that's the difference that matters right now. What do you want from me? I want you to tell the truth. Everything you saw, everything Dale told you, every delivery, every drop point, every person he threatened. I want you to tell the grand jury what happened in that diner and what happened in that alley when Wade came back for Nora. If I talk, Dale doesn't have people anymore. Dale has a cell and a federal indictment and lawyers who are trying to figure out how to turn 47 dismissed drug cases and 6 dead bodies into something that doesn't end with a life sentence. Cole held Mitch's gaze. The only person Dale Cruz can hurt now is you, by convincing you to stay loyal to a man who would have thrown you away the second you became inconvenient. Mitch's jaw tightened. His thumbs pressed harder against the table. I got a little sister, Mitch said quietly. She's 14. She thinks I work at an auto parts shop. What do you want her to think when this is over? I want her to think I did one right thing. Then do it. Mitch was quiet for 10 seconds. 20. Cole counted, the way he counted in Kabul when he waited for targets to move, and the silence between heartbeats stretched like elastic. Okay, Mitch said. I'll talk. All of it? All of it. Dale, Wade, the roots, the money, the judge, everything I know. And the diner? Mitch's eyes closed. He told us to scare her. He said if Nora talked, Sophie would end up in the system. He said, his exact words, make sure she knows what happens to women who forget their place. Cole's fist curled under the table. He uncurled it deliberately. Discipline. The same discipline that had kept Ghost from lunging in the diner. The same discipline that separated soldiers from civilians and justice from revenge. Thank you, Mitch. Don't thank me. I should have said something a long time ago. Everyone should have. The point is, you're saying it now. Cole stood and walked to the door. He paused without turning around. Your sister's going to be proud of you, he said. That's worth more than anything Dale ever paid you. He left Mitch sitting at the table with his hands flat and his thumbs touching, and tears running down a face that was 22 years old and learning, for the first time, that courage and shame could occupy the same body at the same moment. The grand jury convened 2 weeks later. Agent Kent presented the case with the surgical precision of a woman who had spent 18 months building something and finally had the tools to finish it. Lisa Vega's financial record. Batch documentation showing Dale's knowledge of contaminated product. Tillman's testimony about the blackmail. Mitch Grady's testimony about the intimidation operations. Maria Gonzalez's testimony about the suppressed health reports. Tom Bennett's testimony about 3 years of witnessing destruction. And the email records from Judge Cross's office showing 47 dismissed cases tied directly to Dale's payments. Nora testified on the 4th day. She sat in the witness chair with her hands in her lap, steady, the way they'd been steady when she held pressure on Amy Chen's chest in Afghanistan, while the world exploded around her. She told them about Lisa's phone call, about the teddy bear, about 14 months of silence that ate her alive from the inside, while she watched the same poison that killed her sister flow through the town where she was trying to raise Lisa's daughter. Why did you wait? The prosecutor asked. Because I was alone, Nora said. Because every system that should have protected us was owned by the man who was destroying us. Because I had a 7-year-old girl who depended on me
and I couldn't risk losing her to a CPS complaint filed by the same person who killed her mother.
What changed? Nora looked at Cole, sitting in the gallery with Ghost at his feet. The seal met her eyes, didn't nod, didn't smile, just held.
Someone showed up, Nora said. Someone who didn't have to.
A man driving through town who heard something wrong and didn't keep driving. She paused. My sister was brave enough to document the truth. I was scared enough to hide it. And then a stranger and his dog walked into a diner and reminded me that fear doesn't get to make the final decision. Courage does. The grand jury returned indictments on all counts. Dale Cruz, federal racketeering, drug trafficking, 6 counts of involuntary manslaughter, witness intimidation, obstruction.
Wade Purcell, conspiracy, assault, intimidation, distribution.
Judge Raymond Cross, judicial corruption, obstruction of justice, conspiracy. 14 additional arrests across the distribution network in 4 states. Mitch Grady was granted a reduced plea in exchange for his cooperation. He would serve 18 months in a minimum security facility and emerge with a record, a second chance, and a 14-year-old sister who came to every hearing and held his hand through the glass. Sheriff Tillman cooperated fully. He testified for 3 hours. He provided documentation, recordings, and a 5-year timeline of blackmail that corroborated everything Nora and Lisa's records showed. In exchange, his son's juvenile record was sealed, and Tillman was allowed to resign with no criminal charges. He turned in his badge on a Tuesday morning, stood in front of the courthouse, didn't make a speech, just took off the badge, set it on the steps, and walked away. Tom Bennett, watching from the diner, said to Gloria, 20 years wearing that thing, 5 years hiding behind it. Took him long enough to put it down. Better late than buried, Gloria said. Amen to that. The town started breathing. Not all at once, breath by breath, the way a body comes back after being held underwater. Businesses that had been crushed by Dale's lease manipulation began reopening. Families that had fled returned. The diner, now free of Dale's shadow, became what it had always wanted to be. Not a front, not a transaction point, but a place where people sat down and talked to each other without checking who was listening. Gloria promoted Nora to co-manager. You earned it, she said. Besides, I'm 63, and my knees are filing a grievance. I'm a waitress, Gloria. You were a waitress. Now you're the woman who brought down a drug pipeline with a teddy bear and a combat veteran who doesn't know how to mind his own business. Gloria smiled. That's management material in my book. The GoFundMe started without Nora's knowledge. Tom Bennett set it up, not for her, but for the families affected by the pipeline. The 6 people who died from the contaminated batch. The businesses that burned. The workers who were fired. The children who grew up in houses where the silence was louder than the drugs. It raised $40,000 in the first week, $80,000 by the second. By the end of the month, it crossed $150,000, enough to establish a community recovery fund named after the 6 people who died, including Lisa. The Lisa Vega Memorial Fund. Nora saw it online and cried for 20 minutes in the diner bathroom before Gloria banged on the door and told her to come out because the lunch rush wasn't going to serve itself and heroes still had to work. Cole stayed through all of it, not because anyone asked, not because he had nowhere else to go, because Ghost had chosen Sophie and Sophie had chosen Ghost, and the tangled mathematics of loyalty and loss had created an equation that only worked if all the variables stayed in the same place. But Montana waited, Ryan waited, and Nora knew it before Cole said it. You need to go, she told him one evening after closing. Sophie was asleep in the back booth, with Ghost draped across her like a fur blanket, the girl's hand resting on the dog's ear, both of them breathing in the synchronized rhythm of creatures who had decided they belonged to each other.
I know, Cole said. Then go. It's not that simple. It is that simple. Your brother's ashes are in a cabin in Montana, and you've been driving toward them for a month and stopping everywhere else because arriving means it's real.
Nora held his eyes.
I know, because that's exactly what I did with Lisa's drive. I held it for 6 months because using it meant admitting she was really gone.
When did you get wise?
I've always been wise. I was just too scared to act on it.
And now?
Now I've got a diner to run, a niece who's talking again, and a town that's figuring out what it looks like without a boot on its neck.
Nora paused.
Go to Montana. Get Ryan. Bring him home.
Where's home?
That's for you to figure out. But Cole, she stopped, started again. When you're done, when you've said what you need to say to your brother, if you need a place to come back to,
I'll come back.
You don't have to.
I know I don't have to. That's why it matters. Cole left the next morning. Sophie cried when Ghost jumped into the truck. The German Shepherd looked back at her through the window and whined, the sound he only made for people he'd been ordered to leave behind.
Sophie pressed her palm against the glass. He'll come back, Cole told her, crouching to her level. How do you know? Because you're the first person he's chosen since Kabul, and Ghost doesn't give up on the people he chooses. Promise? On my brother's name.
Sophie studied him the way she studied everything, with the intense, unflinching assessment of a child who had learned to read the truth in people's faces because the words couldn't always be trusted.
Okay, she said. But call me when you get there, and hold the phone to Ghost's ear. You know dogs can't understand phones. Ghost understands everything.
Cole drove north, 6 hours to Montana. Ghost in the passenger seat, head near the window, watching the world pass with amber eyes that cataloged everything and judged nothing. Somewhere past the state line, Cole started talking. He told Ghost about Ryan, about the cabin, about the voicemail he didn't answer,
about the silence that followed and the guilt that filled it.
He told Ghost about Nora and Sophie and the diner and the teddy bear and the way a 7-year-old girl had whispered, "He's warm," and unlocked something in a war dog that 4 months of grief hadn't been able to touch. Ghost listened. He shifted his head to the console and rested it between the seats, one ear turned toward Cole, the other toward the road. The dual attention of an animal that understood instinctively that his handler was bleeding from a wound that no medic could see, and the only treatment was presence. "Ryan would have loved you," Cole said. "He would have loved all of them." Ghost's tail moved once. Agreement or comfort, or just the involuntary response of a dog who heard his handler's voice crack and needed to say, in the only language he had, "I'm still here." The cabin was small. Pine trees, mountain air, a mailbox stuffed with 3 weeks of uncollected letters. Cole stood at the door for 5 minutes before opening it. Ryan's ashes were on the kitchen table. A simple box, a folded flag, and a letter Cole hadn't known existed, propped against the box, in Ryan's handwriting. Cole opened it, read it once, read it again, then sat down on the floor of his dead brother's kitchen and pressed the letter against his chest, and cried the way Nora had cried in the diner bathroom. Completely, mercilessly, without restraint. Ghost lay beside him, pressed his body against Cole's side, rested his head on Cole's thigh, and stayed, the way he always stayed, through the explosions, through the body bags, through the 3,000-mile drive, through every dark moment when the only thing standing between Cole and the void was 85 pounds of loyalty that refused to let him fall. The letter said, "Cole, I'm sorry. I know you'll blame yourself. Don't. You answered every time you could. The times you couldn't weren't your fault. They were mine. I stopped calling because I didn't want you to hear what I'd become. I wanted you to remember me as the guy who taught you to fight, not the guy who forgot how to live. Take care of yourself, brother. And if you find someone worth staying for, stay. That's the one thing I never learned how to do. I love you. Always. Ryan. Cole folded the letter, put it in his pocket, picked up the box. "Let's go home, buddy," he said. Ghost stood, walked to the door, looked back at Cole with amber eyes that asked the only question that mattered. And Cole Archer, who had spent a month driving away from a dead brother and toward a living family he hadn't known he was looking for, opened the door and stepped into the mountain air and knew, with the absolute certainty of a man who had finally stopped running, exactly where home was. Cole scattered Ryan's ashes on the ridge behind the cabin at sunrise. Ghost sat beside him, facing the valley where the light hit first, amber eyes steady against the wind. The box was empty now. The flag was folded under Cole's arm, and Ryan's letter sat in his chest pocket, pressed against his heartbeat like a second pulse. "I found them," Cole said to the wind, to the ridge, to whatever part of Ryan still existed in the spaces between things. "The people you told me to find. The ones worth staying for." He paused. "There's a woman who is a combat medic. She carries the same weight we carried, and she does it while raising a 7-year-old girl who doesn't trust anyone except an 85-pound German shepherd. There's a town that was suffocating under a man who sold poison and called it business. And there's a diner where the coffee is terrible and the cook is 63, and the waitress said no when the whole world expected her to kneel." Ghost's tail moved once against the ground. "You would have loved them, Ryan. You would have walked through that door and you would have stayed. That's the thing I couldn't figure out. Why you stopped staying. Why the world got so loud that the only quiet you could find was the permanent kind." Cole's voice broke. He let it. "But I understand now. You stopped staying because nobody gave you a reason to. Nobody walked into your room and said, 'I need you here.' Nobody showed up." He crouched beside Ghost and put both hands on the dog's face. "I'm showing up now. I know it's late. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I'm showing up for the people who are still here. And I'm going to stay. The way you wanted to stay. The way you deserved to stay. Because somebody finally taught me that leaving is the thing that breaks you. Not the war, not the loss, the leaving." Ghost pressed his forehead against Cole's chest. The dog's breath was warm and steady, the rhythm of an animal that had survived everything the world had thrown at him and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. And in that moment, on a ridge in Montana with empty hands and a full heart, Cole Archer forgave himself for the voicemail he didn't answer. Not because the guilt disappeared. It never would. But because Ryan's letter had given him the one thing guilt can't survive. Permission. Stay. That's the one thing I never learned how to do. Cole stood, folded the flag tighter, looked at the valley one more time. "I love you, brother. Always." Then he walked to his truck, opened the door, and drove south, toward Ridgewood, toward Nora, toward Sophie. Toward the only place that had felt like the word home, since before the war turned every word hollow. Ghost settled into the passenger seat, nose near the window, watching the road unwind behind them, like a thread being pulled from something that had been tangled for too long. 6 hours. Cole drove them in 5. He pulled into Ridgewood at 4 in the afternoon. The town looked different. Not physically, but energetically. The way a body looks different after a fever breaks. People were on the sidewalks. The hardware store that had been closed for 8 months had a new sign in the window. 2 kids rode bikes down Main Street without looking over their shoulders. Cole parked in front of the diner. Through the window, he could see Gloria behind the counter, and Nora carrying plates, and Tom Bennett in his usual booth, and the ordinary, extraordinary machinery of a town that was learning how to function without fear. He didn't go in. He sat in the truck for a minute, Ghost beside him, Ryan's flag on the seat between them. "Ready?" he asked the dog. Ghost barked once. The first bark Cole had heard from him since Kabul. Not a warning, not a command response, just a bark. Loud, clear, definitive. The sound of a dog who had something to say and finally said it. Cole laughed. It surprised him. The sound came from somewhere deep and unfamiliar, a place he'd forgotten existed. "Okay, let's go." He opened the door. Ghost jumped out and trotted to the diner entrance like he was reporting to a duty station. Cole followed. The bell above the door rang. Gloria looked up. Tom looked up. 3 customers at the counter looked up. Nora turned from the table she was serving and stopped. The plate in her hand tilted. She caught it, combat reflexes still sharp, and set it down without looking. "You're back," she said. "I'm back." "That was fast." "I drove 5 hours instead of 6. "That's reckless." "I had motivation." Sophie came running from the back booth where she'd been doing homework. She hit Ghost at full speed, the way she always did. Arms around his neck, face buried in brown tan and black fur. Ghost's tail went wild. He licked her ears, her hands, her face, making the whining sound he only made for the people he'd chosen. "You came back," Sophie said into Ghost's fur. "I knew you would." "I told you he would," Cole said. Sophie looked up at him. Those brown eyes, Lisa's eyes, carrying everything Lisa had carried, all the fear and love and impossible hope that passed from mother to daughter, even when the mother was gone. "Did you find your brother?" she asked. The diner went quiet. Not the oppressive silence of Dale Cruz's era, the respectful quiet of people who recognized a sacred moment and gave it space. "I found him," Cole said. "I said goodbye, and then I came home." "This is home?" Cole looked at Nora. She was standing by the counter with a coffee pot in one hand and the other hand pressed against her chest, holding something in, or letting something out. And her eyes were bright, and her jaw was set, and she was the most complete person he had ever seen. Not perfect, not healed. Complete. Every broken piece accounted for, and still standing. "Yeah, kid," Cole said. "This is home." Tom Bennett raised his coffee cup from his booth. "About damn time." "Language, Tom," Gloria said. "I'll use whatever language I want. The man just drove 1,000 miles to come back to a diner with bad coffee and a stubborn waitress. That deserves at least one profanity." "The coffee is not bad," Gloria said. "The coffee is terrible, Gloria. It's always been terrible. We come for the company." Gloria pointed a spatula at him. "One more word, and I'm cutting you off." "You've been threatening that for 22 years. "And one day I'll mean it." Nora set down the coffee pot and crossed the diner to where Cole stood. Ghost was still on the floor with Sophie, the two of them locked in a reunion that operated on its own timeline, independent of the adults who thought they were running the show. "Ryan?" Nora asked quietly. "Scattered him on the ridge behind the cabin. Sunrise." Cole reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter. "He left me this." Nora read it. Her lips moved slightly over the words the way they did when she was processing something that mattered too much for speed. When she finished, she folded it carefully and handed it back. "He told you to stay," she said. "He told me to stay." "Are you?" "I'm standing in a diner in a town I'd never heard of 6 weeks ago, with a dog who's adopted a 7-year-old girl and a dead brother's letter in my pocket telling me to do the one thing he never could." Cole met her eyes.
Yeah, I'm staying. Nora didn't smile. She did something harder. She let the guard down. The medic's composure. The soldier's discipline. The armor she'd worn since Amy Chen bled out in her arms, and the world taught her that loving people was the fastest way to lose them. She let it down, and what was behind it wasn't weakness, or need, or desperation. It was the quiet, fierce recognition of someone who had been carrying a weight alone and was ready, finally, completely, to share it. Good, she said, because the kitchen sink is leaking and I don't know how to fix it. That's why you want me to stay? Plumbing? Gloria says your hands are useful. I'm testing the theory. My hands built combat outposts in Afghanistan. Then a kitchen sink should be a vacation. Cole almost laughed again. Twice in one day, a record. The weeks turned into something Nora hadn't expected. Routine. Not the survival routine of double shifts and sleepless nights and counting dollars against medical bills. Real routine. The kind that builds itself from ordinary moments, repeated until they become the architecture of a life. Cole fixed the sink. Then the back door. Then the walk-in cooler that had been running at the wrong temperature since Gloria couldn't remember when. His hands worked the same way they worked in the field. Methodical, precise, designed for function. The diner's infrastructure improved in direct proportion to the amount of time Cole spent inside it, as if the building itself was responding to the presence of someone who knew how to repair things. Ghost became the diner's unofficial mascot. He lay by the door during business hours, greeting regulars with a tail wag and strangers with a measured assessment that sorted threats from customers in half a second. Children loved him. Adults respected him. Tom Bennett brought him bacon scraps every morning, which Ghost accepted with the dignified restraint of a military working dog who was absolutely not supposed to eat table food, but had decided that retirement came with certain privileges. Sophie changed the most. The silence that had wrapped around her for 14 months began to crack. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in small, accumulating ways that added up to something extraordinary. She spoke to Gloria first. "Can I have more syrup?" 3 words that made Gloria cry into the pancake batter and blame onions that didn't exist. Then she spoke to Tom. "Mr. Bennett, Ghost wants your bacon." Tom gave her the entire plate and told everyone within earshot that he'd been personally addressed by the bravest little girl in Colorado. Then she spoke to her teacher, then to 2 classmates, then to the school counselor who called Nora and said, "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." "I'm not doing anything," Nora said. "The dog is doing it." But it wasn't just the dog. It was the constellation. Ghost and Cole and Nora and Gloria and Tom and Maria and the diner and the town and the slow, stubborn process of a community remembering that it could be trusted, that adults could be counted on, that the people who said they would stay actually stayed. Sophie's therapist called it earned security. Nora called it a miracle. Cole called it what it was. A 7-year-old girl deciding, one word at a time, that the world deserved another chance. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Federal courthouse in Denver. Cole drove Nora every day. Ghost stayed with Sophie, the arrangement that had become so natural that questioning it felt absurd. The dog guarded the girl. The girl read to the dog. The system worked. Dale Cruz sat at the defense table for 12 days and watched his empire disassemble in real time. Lisa's financial records, Mitch's testimony, Tillman's testimony, Maria's testimony, the batch documentation showing Dale's knowledge of contaminated product, the timeline proving he distributed a lethal batch after his own bookkeeper told him it would kill people. His lawyers tried everything. Character witnesses, none credible. Procedural challenges, all denied. A last-minute claim that Lisa's records were fabricated.
demolished by forensic analysis showing the files were created on Dale's own company hardware, time-stamped over 3 years, with metadata that matched his network's digital fingerprint. The prosecution's closing was surgical. Kent laid out the math. 3 years, 4 states, 6 confirmed deaths from contaminated product, 47 dismissed court cases, 1 corrupted judge, 1 blackmailed sheriff, and a town held hostage by a man who believed silence was the same as consent. Dale Cruz didn't just sell drugs, Kent told the jury. He sold silence. He bought it from a sheriff. He purchased it from a judge. He extracted it from a town through fear, intimidation, and the systematic destruction of anyone who dared to speak. And when a young woman named Lisa Vega, a mother, a bookkeeper, a person who made mistakes and was trying to correct them, when she decided the silence had to end, Dale Cruz made sure she ended instead. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Federal racketeering, drug trafficking, 6 counts of involuntary manslaughter, witness intimidation, obstruction of justice. The sentencing came 6 weeks later. 37 years. Federal prison. No parole. Wade Purcell, 15 years. Judge Cross, 22 years and permanent disbarment. 47 cases reopened. 6 deaths reinvestigated. Lisa Vega's death officially reclassified from accidental overdose to homicide by distribution of a controlled substance. Nora was in the courtroom when the reclassification was read. She didn't react visibly. She sat with her hands in her lap, steady, the way they'd always been steady. Through combat, through loss, through 14 months of silence that had nearly consumed her. But under the table, her foot pressed against Cole's boot, and Cole pressed back. And that small, hidden point of contact said everything that the courtroom couldn't hear. It's over. She's not accidental anymore. She's not a statistic. She's a name, and the man who took it from her is going to pay for it with every day he has left. The state legislature passed the bill in November. Nora's Law. Mandatory independent investigation of all overdose deaths in communities where law enforcement conflicts of interest exist. Whistleblower protections for medical personnel who report suspicious patterns. Automatic federal reporting when 3 or more overdose deaths from the same batch occur within a single distribution zone. Nora testified before the committee. She wore the same clothes she wore to the diner. No suit, no performance. She sat in the witness chair and told them about Lisa, about the phone call at 2 a.m., about a woman who saw something wrong and tried to stop it and was killed for the effort, about a teddy bear with a USB drive inside it, and a 7-year-old girl who held that bear every night without knowing she was holding her mother's last act of courage. "My sister made mistakes," Nora said. She got clean, she relapsed, she got clean again. She was human, and she was murdered, not by an accident, not by bad luck, by a man who knew his product was lethal and sold it anyway, because dead customers don't testify. She paused. The room was silent. This law won't bring Lisa back. It won't bring back the 5 other people who died that week. But it will make sure that the next time someone's sister or daughter or mother dies from a contaminated batch in a small town where the sheriff can't be trusted, somebody outside that town is required to ask why. Nora's voice held. Lisa asked why. She died for it. The least we can do is make sure asking isn't fatal anymore. Unanimous vote. The governor signed it on a Tuesday. Nora held the pen he used, turned it over in her fingers, and put it in her pocket beside Ryan's letter. 2 small objects that carried the weight of everything. Spring came to Ridgewood the way spring comes to places that have survived winter. Gradually, stubbornly, with a warmth that felt earned rather than given. The diner expanded. Gloria hired 2 new servers and a sous chef, and still worked 60 hours a week, because retirement was a concept she acknowledged in theory and ignored in practice. Nora managed the front, handled the books. Clean books, transparent, the kind Lisa should have been keeping, and made sure every new employee knew that the building they worked in had a history, and that history mattered. Cole built a small addition to the diner, a community room where town meetings happened, where AA groups met on Thursday nights, where families affected by the pipeline gathered to talk about what they'd lost and what they were rebuilding. His hands, trained for combat, had found a different purpose. Construction, repair, the physical work of making broken things functional again. Tom Bennett still came every morning. Same booth, same order, same tip.
He'd started bringing his grandson, a 10-year-old named Jack, who wanted to be a veterinarian, and spent most of his breakfast trying to convince Ghost to let him check his teeth.
Ghost doesn't need a vet, Cole told Jack. Every dog needs a vet, Jack replied, with the absolute certainty of a child who had already decided his career and was practicing on every available subject. Ghost, for his part, tolerated the dental inspections with the long-suffering patience of a war hero who had survived IEDs and drug dealers and was now being examined by a 10-year-old with a flashlight. Mrs. Patterson brought cookies every Sunday. Maria Gonzalez switched to the day shift and started talking, really talking, to anyone who would listen, including a column she wrote for the local paper about healthcare access in small towns. Old Pete still nursed 1 coffee for 3 hours, but his stories had changed. He no longer talked about Ridgewood before the Redfords. He talked about Ridgewood after. About the day the silence broke. About the morning federal agents filled Main Street, and the sound of sirens wasn't fear, but justice. About a waitress who said no, and a soldier who stayed, and a dog who chose a little girl, and a town that remembered, after 3 years on its knees, what standing looked like. On a warm evening in May, Nora and Cole sat on the bench outside the diner after closing. Sophie was inside, reading Ghost, a book about a dog who climbed a mountain. Ghost lay beside her, with his chin on her knee, amber eyes half closed, listening to every word with the dignified attention of an animal who understood, perhaps better than anyone, that the stories we tell each other are the things that keep us alive. Lisa would have hated this bench, Nora said. Why? Too hard. She liked soft things, couches, pillows, blankets. She said the world was hard enough without sitting on hard surfaces by choice. She sounds like she was something. She was everything. Messy, loud, impulsive, brave in the worst possible ways. She loved too hard and trusted too fast, and it killed her. Nora paused. But she also saved an entire town with a USB drive she hid in a teddy bear. So maybe loving too hard and trusting too fast isn't always the wrong move. Sometimes it's the only move. That sounds like something Ryan would say. It's something Ryan wrote, in the letter. Cole pulled it out, worn now, creased from being read too many times, the paper softening the way paper does when it's been held by hands that need it. Stay. That's the one thing I never learned how to do. He learned it through you, Nora said. You stayed for us. That means he stayed for us. The things we do for other people, they carry the people we've lost. Ryan is in every moment you chose not to leave. Cole looked at the letter, then at Nora, then through the window at Sophie, who had fallen asleep with her head on Ghost's shoulder, the book still open in her lap, the dog's amber eyes watching over her with the ancient, patient love of an animal that had found, after a lifetime of war, the one mission that would never end. I should frame this, Cole said, holding up the letter. You should read it to Sophie, when she's older, when she asks why you stayed. What do I tell her? Tell her a soldier drove 1,000 miles looking for a reason to stop. And he found it in a diner where the coffee was terrible, and the cook was stubborn, and a waitress said no, and a 7-year-old girl whispered, "He's warm," to a dog who needed to hear it as much as she needed to say it. That's a lot of words. Then tell her the short version. What's the short version? Nora reached over and took his hand. Not the grip of a combat medic. Not the firm, professional contact of a woman managing a crisis. Just her hand in his, warm, sure, present. Tell her love showed up, Nora said. And it stayed. A truck pulled up to the curb. Old, battered. A woman got out. Young, thin, bruised in places she'd tried to cover with a long-sleeved shirt that wasn't fooling anyone. She held a toddler on her hip and a plastic bag of belongings in her other hand. She looked at the diner the way all lost people look at lit windows, with a desperate, fragile hope that whatever was inside might be safer than what was behind. "Someone at the gas station said," her voice cracked, "they said if you needed help, this was the place to come." Nora stood. Cole stood. Inside, Ghost lifted his head from Sophie's lap, ears forward, amber eyes finding the woman through the glass and performing the instant assessment he'd performed 10,000 times. Friend or threat, safe or dangerous, stay or act. Friend, safe, stay. "What's your name?" Nora asked. "Jesse." "Come inside, Jesse. Are you hungry?" "I haven't eaten since yesterday." "Then you're in the right place. Gloria left soup on the stove." Nora opened the door. "You're safe here." The woman stepped inside. The toddler reached for Ghost's ear. Ghost held perfectly still and let the tiny hand grab hold, the way he let Sophie grab hold, the way he let every broken creature he'd ever encountered grab hold of whatever part of him they needed. Cole watched from the doorway, Ryan's letter in his pocket, his dog on the floor, a 7-year-old girl asleep on a bench, a combat medic heating soup for a stranger, and a town outside the window that had been silent for 3 years and would never be silent again. This is what Ryan meant. This is what staying looks like. Not a place, not a building, not the absence of war. Staying is the decision to be present when someone needs you, to open the door when you could lock it, to say, "Come inside," when the world says, "Keep moving." Staying is the hardest thing a soldier can learn, and the only thing that saves them. Cole stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Ghost's tail moved once. Acknowledgement. Satisfaction. The canine equivalent of a man looking around a room full of people he loves and thinking, "Yes, this is right. This is where we belong." And in a small town in Colorado, where the silence had been broken by a waitress who refused to kneel, a soldier who refused to leave, and a German shepherd who refused to look away, life, imperfect and relentless and extraordinary, continued. Because that's what heroes do. They stop, they help, they stay. And love, real love, the kind that hides in teddy bears and crosses 1,000 miles of highway, and speaks through the steady amber eyes of a dog who has seen the worst of the world and still chooses to guard the best of it, never ever walks away. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere right now, a woman is being told to smile while she serves. Somewhere, a child is holding a bear and waiting for someone to come home. Somewhere, a soldier is driving through the dark looking for a reason to stop. They need to know that the door is open. They need to know that someone stayed. Drop your city in the comments. Type Amen if you believe that justice finds a way and love finds a home. Subscribe, because these stories deserve to be told, and the people who live them deserve to be seen. May God bless you and keep you.
May He be your shield in times of trouble and your light in the darkness. May He grant you the strength of a warrior and the heart of a servant. And may He remind you every single day that the bravest thing you will ever do is stay. God bless you all, and thank you for watching.